Apologies, everybody, for a little bit of a late start, but as I always say, better late than never. The technical difficulties have been sorted out. So, hello, everybody. Good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of Live at the Waterhole. The first up, well, it's a festival of big elephant bulls, and it looks like our friend One Ton is here with all his mates. So, what a wonderful start it is. My name is Ralph Kirsten. And as always, please don't forget that this is a live and interactive experience. So we'd love for you to jump on board with us and send us through your questions and your comments. And you can do that by going on the Wild Earth website and registering. You can also join the conversation on X, formerly known as Twitter, using the hashtag WildEarth. What is it that you'd like to see? What would you like to chat about? Whatever it is, wildlife related, send it on through. What does the bush hold in store for us today? Well, you'll have to sit back, relax, and watch as the animals come down to quench their thirst and cool off. I don't think I've seen such a big group of bulls here before. Still yet to see any breeding herds as well, but what a wonderful surprise. There's One Ton just seemingly wandering off in the background there. Huge tusks, almost reaching to the ground. Almost what you would term a big tusker. We've got another one here that I would say is on the edge of being a big tusker, but he's only got one tusk. He's hanging his trunk over it right now. Don't know what happened to the other tusk, but most likely broken off fighting with other males. Couple of zebra there starting to make their way through. Maybe they'll get some numbers together and then they can start to push these elephants off, as they will do. But they need lots of them, otherwise they need to wait their turn. And Sandy already coming through saying, hello Ralph, so glad to hear you this wonderful Monday. Yes, indeed. Happy Monday, Sandy, and to the rest of you as well. Such a wonderful perspective from this camera, almost at ground level, looking up at the elephants, making them seemingly even bigger. And who would have thought that's even possible? Sometimes a little bit difficult to discern between the rumblings of communication that they have between each other and the passing of gas. I think that last little bit of noise there was the latter being hindgut fermenters. They do produce lots of gas, and so I often smell elephants before I see them, and it's because of that passing of gas that you can indeed smell them if the wind is in the right direction. So an Aline Heather K saying, wow, I haven't seen tusks like those in ages. And lovely to see lots of the sort of borderline big tuskers all together. Of course, One Ton being a real big tusker. But the rest of them got decent sized tusks, but nothing in comparison to him. And Kim Faustino saying big bull ellies. Absolutely. Always wonderful to watch them. And for me, one of the best viewing animals outside of must when they're experiencing much higher levels of testosterone. And so quite grumpy during those times. Not great to view them when they're in that phase. But when they're outside of must, they're generally happy-go-lucky and the best viewing animals. I think big bulls like this could easily digest over 100 liters, probably up to about 200 liters of water a day, depending on how hot it is. And in these parts, it generally doesn't get very cold at all, being very close to the equator. So they don't really have much of a winter. And so they do spend a lot of time, especially during the day, coming through for drinking and cooling off. Pretty much in the land of the giants. And Catherine saying, good to hear you, Ralph. Good to have you on board once again, Catherine. Let's hope for some wonderful wildlife sightings. Some more passing of gas there from these wind machines. And now looks like maybe the zebra are going to have a chance. I think they've seen their gap and they're all going to pile in now. The Ellies might need to back off a bit. You see how they get pushed in from behind from their compatriots? I think they're going to try and take over. Not unless that bull has any say in it, I think. But I think his resistance is futile. That one bull on the left there, he's got a massive tear in his ear. I think we've seen him before. But there are quite a few of them that have tatty ears and a bit of rips in them as well. I'm not 100% sure it's the same one. Bit of dust bathing going on in the background as well. And the zebra starting to push forward, I think trying to exert their advantage. Definitely the most photogenic animals out there, in my opinion at least. A couple of the red bull oxpeckers around on them as well. And Joanne Mello commenting once again. Welcome aboard, Joanne, saying look at the size difference between the elephants and the zebra. It's incredible. Even with them being a bit further away from us, it just goes to show how big they are. And what an accomplishment it is when the zebra actually start driving the elephants back, just by sheer numbers. This group isn't really big enough to hold the elephants off, I think. And it seems like with there being more elephants around as well, they're not as easily pushed off the waterhole. Oh, hello. I wonder if one of these arriving bulls here now is in must. They're looking a bit gnarly, and so maybe that's why the other elephant bulls have gotten out the way. You can probably smell it. So a little bit of breakup in the signal there at Old Doña in Kenya. So we've jumped on over to the Okokuyu waterhole in the Etosha National Park, where we've also, here, a bit different. We've got a breeding herd of elephants that have come in. So nice change. Also a different angle on the camera and from a much higher viewpoint as well. So it makes them look a whole lot smaller. But it'll be interesting to see what happens at Oldonyo. So I'm sure we'll check in there a little bit later. For now, you can see that there's definite east wind blowing over this waterhole, heading all the way down to the coast. And I know from having lots of friends in Namibia that they've said that this year the east weather has been incredible. It's been crazy. The roads have been covered by sand, and sometimes it's almost difficult to see where you're driving. It's worse than fog when that wind gets going. So anybody that knows anything about that east wind will know that it can be a menace, but it can also make for wonderful winter conditions. If it's just a light breeze, it's like a second summer. Quite a few springbok off on the right, having a bit of a dip as well. They're one of the likely swimmers here. The gemsbok and the springbok seem to enjoy it the most. And it's quite interesting because they're the animals, the two, that could actually survive without water at all. So they seem to enjoy the water the most, which is interesting. And this is the beginning of the high season in Namibia, tourism-wise and safari-wise as well. It starts filling up now all the way into the sort of peak season, which is probably between August and up until about the end of October. But it does coincide with the spectacle of wildlife here that starts coming through at the Okokuyo waterhole. So very, very popular waterhole this is, especially at night as well, which it's floodlit, and so a lot of animals coming through, the nocturnal beings coming through at night here, and easily watched from this platform where the camera is. We're sort of just directly above the viewing area of this waterhole. So Asbo saying, hi Ralph, elephants drinking about 200 liters of water a day. And to put that into perspective, a mature oak tree transpires about the same amount daily as well. Yes, we also have the eucalyptus or gum trees in South Africa, Australian native. They were brought through for building material, making lovely posts. And most of the lodges, in fact, are built out of this wood material because of those lovely straight posts that they grow. However, they can also take up to about 200 liters of water a day. So those big plantations of eucalyptus, very, very thirsty, and just like our elephants. It's quite interesting that you say that, Asbo, because that makes me think of the likes of the St. Lucia estuary and the whole lake system. Uh, it was about a decade ago that the mouth was constantly closed because there wasn't enough water. So the whole lake system, which really relies on the influx of the ocean for fresh water, bringing in new organisms from fish to whatever else. With a closed system, it obviously then does put it under stress. But upstream of the rivers, there were massive eucalyptus plantations, which I think was the reason behind it, and was sucking out so much water that the river eventually became closed to the ocean. So there was quite a big project to eliminate a lot of those eucalyptus trees, and pretty much the next year, the river flowed again. So it just showed and proved how much water they were in fact taking, and what an effect it was having on that entire system. And we see there now the oryx or gemsbok coming in for their dip as they're being serenaded by a grey hornbill. Very raptor-like sound, its call, and very often confuse them for the likes of an eagle or so, but that is definitely the grey hornbill. So Mercedes Bean joining once again, saying hello and happy Monday. Well, hello and happy Monday straight back at you, Mercedes Bean. Lovely to have you on board, and nice to start off with elephants all round as well. A couple of zebra and still some springbok milling about in the calcrete rocks in the background, looking very much like snow. And that's, in fact, why it's called the Great White Place. That is the translation of Etosha, the national park, because of this huge inland sea that used to be present here, fed by the Kunene River. But with tectonic movements, that has been diverted straight towards the ocean and then left this to dry out and leave us with what it is now. So the general movements of the elephants when they come in to drink here, they come in from the left, which is pretty much to the south. And they sort of walk in and around the Okukuyu camp itself, and just around the fence, and then they come into the water, and then they sort of generally move off to the right, and then head off in a westerly direction along that yellow brick road towards the bush line in the background. And the direction that elephant trail goes in is towards what we call Sproetjieswoud, which is like the fairy forest. And it's called that because there's a forest of Moringa ovifolia, which commonly called the moringa, just from the Latin name. But there's a whole forest of it, and they're quite similar to baobab trees. Almost look like they've been planted upside down with their roots in the air, and very bulbous sort of trunk as well. And so it's one of the sites to visit when you go on game drive here from Okukuyo. And the gemsbok with their dead straight horns, unmistakable. And I would say, for me, the most beautiful or elegant of all the antelope. It's got to be between them and big bull kudu. But I think oryx or gemsbok in the dunes just makes for incredible viewing. So it looks like the signal has been given by the matriarch and it's time to go. And as predicted, they're heading off on the yellow brick road. So Ian was asking what birds could we see at Okokuyu. So Ian, from here, obviously you can hear that one that is calling. That's a grey hornbill. You can see the little blacksmith lapwings there. In the waterhole itself, there's generally a resident pair of little grebes. There's often a couple of Egyptian geese around as well. Then common visitors that are in and around the little campsite or camp here. You would have the sociable weavers. You could have the acacia-pied barbets, small little birds, but very impressive and lovely colors on them. You could have the crimson-breasted bubu or shrike, which used to be the national bird of Namibia, but very startling red or scarlet, as the name suggests, on the chest, and makes a beautiful call as well. Then the likes of pale chanting goshawks, very common in these parts, Corey bustards, secretary birds, lark-like finches. You can have red-headed finches that very often nest in the sociable weavers' nests, as well as pygmy falcons. At night, we very often see the Vero's eagle owl coming down for a drink at this waterhole and standing taller than the springbok. So it just goes to show how big they actually are. So those are the general birds that you would see around. Of course, you'll also see some of the hornbills, not only the grey hornbill, you can also have the Damara hornbill, which is endemic to Namibia, as well as the Montero's hornbill, and only found in these parts and down into Damara land. So lots of endemic birds in Namibia, in fact. So we can see now as well those elephants disappearing off exactly where I knew they were going to go, heading off towards Sprookjeswoud, the Moringa ovifolia forest. Okay, now that the elephants have headed off, I think we're going to head on back to Old Donyo. Where it's still the old boys club, and doesn't look like there was too much nefarious things brought in by those couple of bulls that seemed to shift everybody else away. I was under the impression that maybe one of them was in must, but it seems all calm for now. He's got a bit of an itch on his foot, scratching it against the other one. So Rob's 4217 asking, with so many animals naturally dying, especially the larger animals, elephants, etc., we rarely see any skeletons. Good question, Robert. What happens to all of the bones, especially the big ones like this? Well, that is all down to our cleanup crew. And that is everything from vultures, all the different species of vultures, which all have a different niche to sort of fulfill within that cleanup crew. And then we've got the likes of jackals and hyenas. who do an amazing job of cleaning up carcasses. And sorry, just to interrupt that conversation, but you can see that this bull elephant here, he's got this nasty wound in his trunk. It seems like it's an old wound, and I do suggest that it's most likely have come from a snare. Probably dealt with by the local rangers who do monitor the elephants and pick up when there's anything like that, and then going to help them with the aid of vets, etc. So I'm pretty sure that this guy has had a snare cut off of his trunk. It was a nasty wound, but he seems to be doing all right, though, albeit with an injured trunk. So back to the question, the cleanup crew, they do an amazing job of cleaning up. Firstly, getting into the animal and feeding on all the organs and the meat. And then as it degrades, they start to then sort of fight over the remains. And that's very often then when you have the likes of jackals, they'll pick up bones, obviously smaller ones. They won't be able to carry massive bones. But they move that away from the carcass to try and have a chance to actually feed on it. Because at the carcass itself, it can be very concentrated with the scavengers and the opportunists. Because all of those scavengers per se, apart from the vultures, can be very good hunters in their own rights as well. But they're opportunists, and they'll get stuck in when there's available food, such as a big carcass of an elephant. So they feed on it, and as it starts to dwindle, they then start to pull pieces off and run off with it, and then they have a little bit of solitude where they're actually able to feed on it. And so this continues over the weeks and months after the death of the animal, and eventually you have it dispersed quite massively. But I would say the big bones are dispersed almost predominantly by hyenas, mainly spotted hyenas, but also the brown hyenas too. And so I would say that mainly down to them, shifting them around. And then if you do get some rain, even though those bones have been completely sort of eaten, devoid of any flesh or whatnot, there's still obviously the marrow inside it, so there's, the animals are still attracted to it. But once it becomes dry, it sort of starts to lose its smell. But then when it rains, that smell comes out again, and then you have animals moving back to carcasses and starting to feed on it again when that happens. And then you have more dispersal of the bones. And then over the years, it gets completely dispersed by those predators and scavengers. So in my mind, in areas such as this, where you have such big animals, but you don't really see many big bones lying around, it's because of the real efficiency of that cleanup crew. And it just means that it's in a healthy balance, and there's enough of them all round to make sure that it's all cleaned up. So no bones equals a very good cleanup crew and a healthy balance. See, and I can also bring that back to areas where there's not a real healthy balance of large predators slash scavengers. Lots of lions, lots of hyena, lots of jackals. But like I say, jackals not really able to move big bones. So it's more the hyenas and lions and a high concentration of them. Then, in private reserves where this has occurred in previously sort of farmed areas where they've pretty much gotten rid of all those big predators, then you start to have carcasses that remain in the same position for extended periods of time, for many years, and they pretty much just eat the meat off of it, and then they leave the skin, and eventually that degrades, and then you just have the bones. But for many years, if you have thick-skinned animals, the likes of a giraffe that's died for whatever reason, that skin can stay there for even decades, because it's so thick. But that just goes to show it's a real sign that there's none of those big scavenging predators on or in and around the area. And I've seen that on many private reserves where those concentrations are low. Whereas when you're in these areas where the concentrations are high, you hardly ever get to see an old carcass that's still got a skin on it and with most of the bones still intact. So as far as I'm concerned, it's a real sign of a healthy ecosystem, food chain, and you have those apex predators in high numbers. That's always good. So obviously lots of communicating going on that we can't hear, and we don't know what they're talking about. But there are discussions, often with them standing still, often with a big reaction to something that we obviously can't see. Generally just talking amongst themselves and reacting to whatever it is that's being said. So Catherine saying that I've seen a whole elephant skeleton. It was fascinating to see the anatomy. Always fascinating, I find, to see the anatomy or the internal structure or skeleton of animals, especially ones that I see regularly. And then always interesting to see what they look like below the skin. But the bull is saying apparently it's been that way for 3 years. And that's the elephant with the injured trunk. So 3 years ago, I would think that elephant very unluckily had a snare on its trunk. It is unfortunate, but fortunate, I'd say, that it has been identified and relieved. Then Victor saying, how come we never see breeding herds of elephants here? Victor, good question. I haven't quite worked it out just yet. You do have a lot of movements of the animals in these areas. We are sort of, near to the Amboseli wilderness area. So this does also partake in the sort of movements of animals of the Great Migration. And what we found when I was in the Masai Mara, for instance, that when you have the migration and the massive numbers of wildebeest and zebra that move into the Mara Triangle, all of the elephants move out of it, just like we've witnessed here at this waterhole, that when those zebra come in numbers, they're even able to push the elephants away. So they literally fill up the entire grasslands on the Mara Triangle. It's almost difficult to see between them in the grass. So it's a little bit crowded, and the elephants seemingly leave the area entirely. But then when the migration moves out of Kenya and back to the Serengeti, then all the breeding herds of elephants move back into that Mara Triangle because they got literally the place back to themselves. In amongst the prides of lions, which is the difficult times for them because there's such high concentrations of them, and with the herds of zebra and gazelle and wildebeest that leave, it's obviously slim pickings during that period for the lions, but lots of pickings for the likes of elephants that move back into that area. So what I'm thinking is it's a seasonal sort of movement of these elephants. Not quite sure where the breeding herds are now, but I would think that at some stage we're going to have the breeding herds coming through here. And I think it's just these solitary bulls that hang around during this period. And then maybe later on in the year, maybe we'll have some coming through. I don't know. We'll actually have to watch and study it and see if that actually happens. But that is my suggestion or my feeling is that it's in fact a whole movement or migration of animals in and out of certain areas according to the numbers of the other animals that are in there as well. As you see these guys even getting startled by running zebra, it does make it interesting that the smaller animals are able to move these herds of elephant and the big bulls as long as they come in numbers. And they obviously know it as well. There's sort of a continuous jostling for space here at the waterhole. The elephants generally dominate, but as I say, it depends on how many zebra are part of their herds or the arriving herds that come in to drink. So Catherine was saying that the elephant bull, there's lots happening now. That elephant bull here, sort of center stage right now, is doing well. It's amazing how he gets water up that trunk. Catherine, I think it would be pretty similar to having a straw with a hole in it. I think, you'd be able to get water up that straw, but you'd have to put a lot more energy into it. And I think it may be similar with him. I don't think that he can get as much water up that trunk as he would normally. So he might spend more time having to drink to get the same amount. But they're very adaptable creatures. And obviously, he's adapted and he's still surviving 3 years down the line. But I would think and would suggest that he's going to take longer to quench his thirst. Now, Kit Kat saying that the zebra is so determined, but against such bossy elephants. Kit Kat, I think if I was big as an elephant, I'd also be a little bit bossy. Wouldn't you? They're not very aggressive, though. They can be, however, as we've noticed, especially when they come into must. We watched an elephant bull come in here one night while there was a giraffe drinking, and for no apparent reason, he attacked the giraffe. And he did jab it with his tusk, and it literally disemboweled the big bull giraffe as he ran off. And we heard that it died a couple of days later, and then was obviously a feast for all of the scavengers, or the opportunistic predators came to feed on it. So you do need to keep your eye on these bulls because they can surprise you, and whether they're coming in or out or in must, especially, will be unpredictable. There we can see Mount Kilimanjaro in the background, the snow-capped peaks, and that's where it is, straight off behind these elephants. Right, so another wonderful stop in here at Old Donyo, but we've got other places to visit, and I think that's what we're going to do now. And we're going to head to the KwaZulu-Natal province in South Africa and the Tembe Elephant Park, where, surprise, surprise, we've got another elephant. Not quite of the size that we're seeing there at Old Donyo, but there are some of the big tuskers that occur here in this park. Pretty much the reason why the park was proclaimed was to protect these big elephant bulls. As we hear the very sad call of the emerald spotted wood dove. A couple of other individuals about, most likely bulls. They like enjoying a bit of shade there just off of the waterhole. It seems to also be a nice dusty spot that they can dust bathe. There we go. A bit of wrestling now underway, a bit of pushing and shoving. So Dinah asking a nice question, saying, are there generally more bulls in the world than Ellie cows? Now, Dana, I don't know the exact statistical numbers or the ratios of it, but what I can say is that obviously, generally on game reserves, I notice that there's more females, obviously with the big breeding herds, and then you have the males, which are normally in smaller groups or solitary. So I would say that there's generally more cows than there are females, but there's also a higher mortality rate with the bulls, and this is almost general across the different mammal species. Is that the males don't live as long as the females? With humans, we understand why. Males generally get up to no good for no apparent reason, just for the fun of it. But it's generally also between, fighting amongst themselves for mating rights and dominance. So you have a much higher mortality rate, and as a result, um, generally a lower lifespan with the males. I just see these stalks that we've got on the other side. I think it's yellow-billed stalks that are in there. There's also some impala off on the edges. So, yes, generally speaking, you would say that in mammals, males have a shorter lifespan, as well as generally lower in numbers. A lot of competition between them for the females, for mating rights, and for having dominance amongst themselves. So I think it doesn't even matter if there was a higher population of males within a particular area. You'll have a lot more aggression between them. You'll have a higher mortality rate until that sort of balance is returned. I would think that the balance of forces would be a little bit incorrect or unbalanced in an area where you have too many males. There will be a lot of aggression, lots of fighting, until obviously that balance is then restored once more. For instance, if you had to look at lions, I think it would be very similar. You could have a lot of male lions, but then you'll have a lot of fighting between them and a high mortality rate until they get to a sort of more balanced number. So obviously, it can go up and down, can fluctuate within different reserves as well. But I think then the natural balance is resumed from the animals themselves through fighting and through competition. A nice little wrestling match starting there now between very similar sized bulls. Yeah, they're just a bit of their tusks knocking together. And that's obviously an indication of, when they get going with a real fight, that happens at a much more intense sort of situation. So, very easily break each other's tusks, especially when a younger bull is sort of attacked by a much larger bull. They tend to break them off quite easily. We've seen this on many different occasions in different game reserves. It was very dominant bulls, and then younger bulls coming into must and moving into the area where the dominant bull is around the females. They don't take nonsense, and yeah, sometimes lucky that the smaller elephants don't get killed, but very often have their tusks broken off. It's always fascinating to watch the elephants. It's such a big animal, so heavy, and yet as they walk, they're so graceful and they're so soft as they put their feet down. Lots of padding within those feet as well. So they can almost walk past you and you can hardly hear a sound apart from the little bit of crunching of whatever's underneath them. But there's no thudding as you would think from such a large weight putting its feet down. You hardly hear them at all. Seems these two are quite intent on continuing the wrestling match. Now, Kit Kat is saying, I would love to know why elephants are so intolerant of other animals. Kit Kat, I'm not so sure about that. As with all the animals in the bush, they've got to think for their own safety. And yes, the elephants do push their weight around a bit, but for them, it's all about them. And for the other animals, it's about them as well. So they do use their weight and their size as an advantage. But I think it's just all in aid of survival. So I don't think that they have anything to hold for the zebra in terms of their survival. So if they're getting in their way, and they can, they'll swat them and move them out the way, and so that it makes their life more easy, and they can drink more comfortably at the waterhole. I think if the zebra could do it, they would, and sometimes they can when they come in real numbers and push the elephants back. So I think it's just everybody looking out for themselves. And as we say in Afrikaans, elke man for himself. And that's pretty much what it is out here in the wild and in the bush. Everybody's just worried about their own personal survival. And sometimes when you have sociable groups, well, they do look after each other within that species. But in general, it is every man for himself. There's a bull in the background with pretty decent sized tusks on him. Looks like he's got the potential of being a big tusker. Those tusks could continue growing. It looks like he's probably in his 30s. So there's still a bit of growing to do. I would say early 30s at the most. So Ian was asking, is there a record of the largest tusker in South Africa? Now, Ian, I'll have a look to see which one, in fact, is believed to be the largest tusker currently still alive. I think Isolweni, that's sort of very often seen on Pridelands in the Greater Kruger, probably up there with one of the largest remaining in South Africa. But on record, according to Wikipedia, they say that it's Isilo. His name was Isilo, and he lived from 1956 to 2014. They say one of South Africa's largest African elephants and the largest living tusker in the southern hemisphere before his death. He was known as a tusker, or a male elephant with tusks weighing over 100 pounds. Although Silo died of natural causes relating to old age, his death attracted international media attention because his tusks, considered a national heritage artifact, were missing when his body was discovered. So he was an African elephant that lived in the Tembe Elephant Park, where we are currently. And Isilo means king in Zulu. He was born during the late 1950s. He was estimated to have been at least 58 years old when he died, and he weighed between 6.5 and 7 tons. His tusks were estimated to be more than 3 meters long each, and the right tusk weighed about 65 kilograms, and the left about 60. So he died of natural causes in an area known to be his home range in a southwest section of the park around 10 January 2014. His carcass was discovered in late March 2014, and his death was announced on April 4, 2014, by the Izimvelo KZN Wildlife and Ernest Robertson, who was the manager of the Tembe Elephant Park Lodge. However, his tusks were missing, surprise, surprise, having apparently been removed sometime between his death and the discovery of his corpse, most likely by suspected rhino poachers, and transported over the border into Mozambique, where the tusks are shipped to the Far East, which is the world's biggest market for ivory. But Isilo's tusks were estimated to have a black market value of approximately 3 million rand at the time. That's about 250,000 US dollars. But I think that will probably be substantially more 10 years later. of water plants there with all those little chicks. Looks like we've managed it now. So feeding on those palm fronds. Looks like sort of quite small lala palms. I think it's a white-browed scrub robin that's calling now as well. So Kit Kat was asking a question, what are elephants doing when they raise 1 foot and their trunk drops to the ground? So Kit Kat, generally when an elephant raises a foot and sometimes even swings it a little bit, we do generally say, that behavior does exhibit a kind of pensive pose. So, if I could liken it to something that we do as humans, if you're listening to somebody or you're thinking about something and you're sitting down, you may put your elbow on the table and rest your sort of chin or your cheek against your hand, either open or closed, in a sort of a pensive pose, as I say. And so we do liken that with elephants as well. When they raise one leg and they're quite still, I think it's coincidental that it's drunk some water. So then at that time, it's probably thinking about something. As the trunk sort of has completed its task of delivering the water into the mouth, and the foot comes up, it's sort of dropping its trunk at the same time as it's pensive about something. Southern Voodoo calling now. You can see lots of relaxed behavior here, lots of swinging of the tails, and they're quite relaxed in that swing. Elephants, very often when they're stressed, their tail will go out at a right angle and it will be held sort of taut. Whereas now you can see how relaxed these tails are. They're just swinging backwards and forwards, just keeping the flies at bay. And the rest of the body language is extremely relaxed. A little bit of ear wafting, but they're not holding those ears outwards, sort of trying to make themselves look bigger. They're totally relaxed, just keeping themselves cool, having a nice drink, and seemingly just enjoying being next to the waterhole. Well, that was quite a shove. Out the way, chap. As we see some more yellow-billed storks moving through in the background. They seem to like feeding on those palm fronds. Okay, so another wonderful stop in here at Tembe Elephant Park, but we're going to change of place and we're going to head back to Old Daniel. Where it's still the big old boys club dominating, and I think the waterhole level has dropped quite substantially. Such big animals drinking so much water. I think a couple of thousand liters could have escaped this waterhole in the last little while, so they'll have to replenish it, I'm sure. Now, I think this is a wonderful opportunity just to read a little article that's written by the Tsavo Trust, speaking on what do elephants do for fun. And I think it's quite pertinent because we often do think that the elephants are enjoying themselves, but it's nice to quantify that. And in animals is clearly capable of what our species considers more complex and considered emotions, The space between us and them seems so much smaller that it arouses our curiosity about their behavior just that little bit more. Elephants often give us evidence of their capacity for compassion or their heightened intelligence. And in their behavior toward one another, they so clearly demonstrate emotional attachment between individuals. They do so in ways that are so similar to how we do in the bond you see in trunk-to-trunk interactions, or in the bashfulness we notice in a young calf's hiding behind a mother's legs, that it inspires a greater degree of understanding, or at least a greater need to understand. We feel we can read more from these signs than we would in species that practice more alien modes of behavior. Perhaps this is the reason we are so much more concerned with understanding what elephants do for fun than we are with what snakes or fish find joy in. When we do, however, try and understand what elephants do for fun, we couch the need for that understanding in the realm of behavioral science. We consider their actions as integral to the forming of bonds, and the bonds themselves as integral to survival. It's interesting how seldom we satisfy our curiosity about elephant behavior from simply a spectator's stance. Do we consider our own search for fun as something we do only in encouragement of our species' survival? We don't. It makes sense that we are intrigued by the perceived necessity of why other species do what we ourselves also do. We approach the understanding of a different species' behavior from a scientific stance, from a desire to understand and see purpose. Adopting this attitude has brought us better understanding of the depth to an elephant's experience. Now, however, in a world where we have become better acquainted with the complexity of elephants' thought and the layers to their social interactions, does the "what does this mean for survival" lens layer in a level of science that now serves to create distance between their species and ours. Below is a list of things that elephants do for fun, and this writer would urge you to try and understand these activities less like tools of survival. Perhaps in doing so, we bring ourselves closer to the species. We may better see ourselves as animals cohabiting this world with neighbors and not others. The socializing. Elephants are highly social animals and enjoy spending time with their herd members. They engage in playful interactions such as touching, grooming, and using their trunks to communicate with each other. Bathing and swimming. Elephants love water, as we have noticed, and often engage in bathing and swimming activities. And they use their trunks to spray water on themselves and playfully splash around. And I've had on numerous occasions, there's a secretary bird wandering through on the right, where elephants have literally sprayed me with water, and I know that it's out of playfulness with me. I wonder if that secretary bird wants to come in for a drink or if he's just hunting for snakes. So dust bathing. Elephants take pleasure in dust bathing, which involves rolling in the mud or dry dust to help protect their skin from the sun and insects, mainly throwing it over themselves. It also provides a way for them to cool down and remove parasites. Exploring and foraging. Elephants are curious creatures and enjoy exploring their surroundings. And they forage for food, using their trunks to search for vegetation and using their tusks to dig up roots and bark. Playing with objects. Elephants have been observed playing with objects such as branches, logs, or even balls. And they use these items to toss, kick, or even balance on for amusement. And I've often seen them putting logs and sticks on top of their head. I think it's also a bit of playful amazement or amusement. Vocalizing. Elephants produce a variety of sounds, including trumpeting, rumbling, and growling. These vocalizations serve as a means of communication, but can also be a form of play or expressing excitement. I think these are these wattled starlings that have come in now outside of breeding plumage. And the last one is scratching and rubbing against objects. Elephants often scratch themselves against trees, rocks, or other rough surfaces. They may rub their bodies, particularly their backs, to relieve itchiness or for pleasure. Very interesting indeed. So Catherine was saying that it would be interesting to see how this elephant with the injured trunk eats with most of the muscles cut. So Catherine, I would say that it's quite low to the end of the trunk. Luckily, he didn't lose the end of it. But I have seen elephants that have, in fact, lost that entire part of the trunk. So they no longer have those two fingers at the end. And they sort of, as a human does, when, obviously, but they don't have bones inside their trunk like we do in our arm. So when they lose the end of that trunk itself, what they then use is the rest of the trunk as a kind of arm without a hand, if we had to lose a hand, in the same way, and sort of, like grab it with the rest of the trunk, circle it around it. And I think they're actually more capable of grabbing things without the end of the trunk than we are without the end of our arm, i.e. a hand. So they are easily adaptable. I think these are insects. It does look like locusts or something that these wattled starlings are getting stuck into. That one on the right there sure is. But they are adaptable and they are able to survive even without the end of their trunk. The earlier it happens in their life, the better for them, as we have found with humans as well. The younger you get a disability, the easier it is for a human to sort of adapt to that situation and learn to work without that appendage that it previously had. Wow, it's really full up here with the elephants now. This is wonderful. So in Bill the Bull, who obviously spends a lot of time watching the different waterhole cameras, which is fantastic and often gives us lovely reports on what has been through or around the waterholes day and night. Often sees what we don't, in the hours that he's watching. And he said he's only seen one breeding herd come through here, but that was at night. So it's good to know, and thank you, Bill, because good to know that they do come through here. And hopefully we can see them come through on the show one of these days. This is an excellent waterhole to watch at night as well on the Africam website. And for one animal in particular, for me anyway, and that's the striped hyena. This is not an animal you get to see every day. And when you spend as much time as I have in the bush, you very often, want to see those special animals that you don't see every day. And a striped hyena definitely is one of them, which you can see here, I think quite regularly in fact, but always during the night. And I would have to say that this waterhole is very special in the amount of bulls that we do see coming through here. because you don't often get to see such big bulls in so many numbers or of similar age all together in one spot. And so I think that for me, for the waterhole show, is what makes this truly unique, apart from all the different sort of animals that we get here that you don't get in other parts, like the fringe-eared oryx, the Maasai giraffe, and of course some of the elegant starlings, and some of the little birds that we get. The striped ground squirrel is another one that's quite special. And of course the gazelles. All of those animals typical for East Africa. So Matt was saying today has been all about Ellie's. Definitely a favorite for me. Yes, indeed, Matt. You know, for me, at this time of the day, generally, out on safari anyway, I go looking for elephants. So it's wonderful that we don't have to go anywhere, and they literally, at these different waterholes. But that's my chosen subject, regardless, at this time of the day. Other than that, I would say following cheetah can be very rewarding during the day as well. But otherwise, generally the wildlife do, especially when it's hot, go in search of shade, and they're quite lethargic, not wasting energy in the heat of the day, which makes sense, but it also doesn't make for great viewing heading out in the middle of the day. That's why we generally mimic the animals, when we're taking guests out in these different national parks and game reserves. And during the middle of the day, we do just like them. Have a bit of a snooze, obviously enjoy lunch, maybe enjoy the waterhole next door. And we can see that secretary bird now right in between this one's legs on the right. I think it is thinking about coming for a drink, but definitely not while these chaps are here. So yes, I would say the activity of elephants midday around waterholes definitely is a gift for us, in that we have lots to still see. There's the zebra now thinking about making a push. We need more of you, I think, to get these guys pushed back. And of course you can hear lots of oxpeckers now prevalent on the zebra. They're also calling. They don't really sit on elephants. There's not enough fur and not really enough ticks for them to feed on. So they prefer the more hairy animals that have got lots of ticks on them. And zebra are prime targets. Oh, that secretary bird just did something on the left there. Had its wings outstretched. Not sure what was happening there. I think it maybe tried to fly in. And Asbo was asking if I've seen a ground woodpecker lately. Asbo, the last one that I saw was on the Amakala Game Reserve. Maybe you saw it with me. But that was at the beginning of spring. So that was sort of September, October last year. So I think I'm probably going to see them again around that time this year. So it's not too long to go before they start nesting. Outside of the breeding periods, I've never seen one. So it's only then that they come to their nesting sites that I've actually spotted them at all. So we'll see. Maybe this year again. Then Darkmane Lover saying, hello, Ralph. Kirsten, it's great to see you hosting live at the Waterhole. And lovely to have you on board once again, Darkmane Lover. Thanks for joining us. Catherine saying, striped hyena is very high up on my bucket list for her Kenya trip. I hope you find one. You'll have to go on some night drives. They'll be out nice and early or nice and late. I'm sure they'll be around. I think that zebra is lucky he didn't get mud sprayed on him. I think the zebra is sensing a gap. He might start to push forward. Yep. It's amazing what you can achieve when you stick together. And the zebra exhibiting just that. Oh, elephant's starting to push forward now. I think it's this guy that just arrived. It's causing a bit of commotion. But the zebra aren't backing down just yet. Is that an eland I see in the background? Or is it a fringe-eared oryx maybe? All of these zebra tails working overtime, spotting flies. Kind of like those twisty things that you get at lodges to keep the flies off the food. Once again, probably biomimicking and copying wildlife and nature. Oh, that elephant on the right's got a real leg itch. That's not a pensive stance. That's just an itchy stance, I think. So these elephants have literally been forced to share the waterhole by the zebra. See, but the zebra don't hang around as much as these bulls do. They sort of get in, have their drink, and move off. Whereas the elephants are doing a little bit more than just drinking. So they sort of, I think, enjoy the water holes a lot more than most of the other animals. And as a result, spend a lot more time at the water. They also have sort of a much bigger advantage in terms of predator problems, with the likes of lions often lying up near to water holes. Oh, there comes the warthog. Or two. So they're a lot more nervous in these kind of hot spots where predators generally can wait for them. And they're a lot more vulnerable with their heads down. And they're not really smelling and looking around in the general vicinity. So the elephants, I think, have a little bit more leeway to be relaxed with their sheer size, especially big bulls like this. Not too perturbed about the likes of lions, whereas the rest of the animals are. So they come in, drink their fill, get the job done, and move out again. There's the elephants, like hanging around and enjoy their time. So we're slowly coming up towards the end of the show. I hope you've all enjoyed it. It's been amazing elephant action. And I'm really hoping that this guy continues on doing well. Sometimes when I see this trunk at different angles, it almost looks like it's going to fall off. But he still looks like he's got full sort of motion, even right down to the tip of it. So we're hoping for the best, young man. And I hope you keep your health up and you keep doing well. But of course, I'll be here, same time, same place tomorrow, and in fact for the rest of the week as well. So please line those questions up for tomorrow. I'd love to have lots more. Love your questions, and thanks for joining us, everybody. It's been a wonderful day, but that's it from me for now. Bush greetings, give it horns. Cheers.